Behind the iconic box braids and on-screen chemistry of Janet Jackson and Tupac lay a production filled with unexpected drama, from fake AIDS test rumors designed as publicity stunts to Tupac literally leaving set to join the LA riots, and Maya Angelou stepping in to calm down heated confrontations involving alleged guns. This beloved 90s classic harbors secrets stranger than fiction. Fact 1. AIDS test was actually a PR stunt. For years after Poetic Justice hit theaters in 1993, one of the most talked about stories from the set was that Janet Jackson had demanded Tupac Shakur take an AIDS test before they could film their kissing scene together. The story spread like wildfire through entertainment media and became part of the movie's legendary behind-the-scenes drama, with Tupac himself confirming the incident in interviews where he expressed his frustration about the whole situation. But here's the twist that nobody saw coming. The entire AIDS test drama was completely made up by director John Singleton as a publicity stunt to generate buzz for his movie. In a 2017 interview, Singleton finally came clean about what really happened, revealing that it was all just an elaborate joke that got way out of hand. According to Singleton, the whole thing started as playful banter on set between him, Janet, Tupac, and the rest of the cast. Both Singleton and Tupac were trying to flirt with Janet during filming. And as Singleton later explained, he jokingly told Tupac that he didn't know if he should let him kiss his actress, since Tupac had been running around with different women. Then Singleton took the joke further, saying that Tupac would need to take an AIDS test before doing any love scenes with Janet. What began as an inside joke between friends somehow transformed into a major publicity story that the media ran with completely. Singleton admitted that once he saw how much attention the story was getting, he decided to use it as a marketing tool for the film. The strategy worked perfectly because everyone was talking about Poetic Justice and the supposed drama between its two biggest stars. The most surprising part is that Tupac was actually in on the joke the whole time, even though he played along with interviews where he acted genuinely upset about the supposed AIDS test request. Singleton later said that Tupac knew it was all for publicity, but he went along with it anyway because he understood that controversy would help promote their movie and get people into theaters. Fact 2. Ice Cube rejected role for bizarre reason. Before Tupac Shakur became Lucky in Poetic Justice, director John Singleton had his sights set on a completely different rapper for the leading man role. Ice Cube was actually the first choice to star opposite Janet Jackson, and Singleton was so confident about casting him that he offered Cube good money for the part without even letting him read the script at first. When Ice Cube finally got his hands on the screenplay, he found one specific scene that completely turned him off from the entire project. The scene in question happens late in the movie, when Lucky's friend Chicago starts physically hitting his girlfriend during their road trip. In the script, Lucky steps in to defend the woman and ultimately kicks Chicago out of the car, leaving him stranded on the side of the road to continue the journey without him. Ice Cube's reaction to this plot point was surprisingly strong, and his reasoning reveals a lot about how he viewed loyalty and friendship at that time in his career. During a 2021 interview, Cube explained that he couldn't understand why his character would abandon a longtime friend for a woman he had just met. He specifically said that he didn't think it was cool for Lucky to kick his homeboy out of the car, and that the whole situation made the character look like a sucker, in his opinion. Cube tried to get Singleton to change this part of the story, but the director refused to alter his vision for the film. Since Singleton wouldn't budge on the script, Ice Cube decided to walk away from the project entirely, even though working with Janet Jackson was tempting enough to make him consider taking the role anyway. Looking back, Ice Cube has admitted that his decision might seem strange to some people, especially since the scene actually shows Lucky doing the right thing by protecting a woman from domestic violence. But at that point in his career, Cube felt strongly about maintaining his tough image and didn't want to play a character who would turn against his friend, regardless of the circumstances. He later said he was glad that Tupac took the role instead, because Tupac killed it and brought something special to the character that worked perfectly for the movie. Fact 3. Q-Tip was Janet's real ex-boyfriend. One of the most memorable moments in Poetic Justice happens right at the beginning when viewers witness an intense romantic scene between Janet Jackson's character and her boyfriend at a drive-in movie theater. What makes this scene particularly fascinating is that the actor playing her doomed boyfriend Q-Tip from A Tribe Called Quest, was actually Janet Jackson's real-life ex-boyfriend when they filmed it. The two had met during the production of Poetic Justice in 1992, where Q-Tip was originally offered the lead role that eventually went to Tupac Shakur. Instead of taking the bigger part, Q-Tip chose to play Markel, Janet's character's boyfriend, who gets tragically killed in the opening scene. Director John Singleton had initially wanted Q-Tip for the lucky role, but Q-Tip preferred the smaller part, which turned out to be a decision that would change his personal life completely. During filming, Q-Tip and Janet developed a genuine romantic connection that extended far beyond their on-screen chemistry. Their relationship became serious enough that they continued dating for several years after the movie wrapped, and their romance eventually led to one of the most successful musical collaborations of the 1990s. In 1997, Janet asked Q-Tip to work with her on a song for her album, The Velvet Rope, which resulted in the hit single, Got Till It's Gone. The kissing scene between Q-Tip and Janet at the drive-in took on extra significance because they were filming intimate moments as a real couple. According to Q-Tip, they ended up shooting that particular kissing scene 11 different times to get it just right. During a 2021 interview, Q-Tip fondly remembered what it was like dating one of the most famous women in music, describing how surreal it felt to watch Janet make breakfast for him, while thinking to himself that he was dating Penny from Good Times. Their relationship lasted until around 2002, and even though they eventually broke up, both have spoken positively about their time together. Q-Tip has said that he loves Janet to death and considers her part of Black royalty because of her status as a member of the Jackson family. Fact 4. Maya Angelou didn't know who Tupac was. When legendary poet Maya Angelou stepped in to calm down a heated confrontation involving Tupac Shakur on the set of Poetic Justice, she had absolutely no idea she was talking to one of the biggest rising stars in hip-hop. This incredible moment of cultural collision happened because Angelou simply saw a young man who needed guidance, not a famous rapper who was already making waves in the music industry. Maya Angelou was on set because she had written the poetry that Janet Jackson's character recites throughout the movie, and she also appeared in a small cameo role during the family reunion scene. At the time of filming in 1992, Tupac was still relatively early in his career, but he was definitely well known enough that most people in the entertainment industry would have recognized his name and face. The confrontation that led to this memorable encounter started when Tupac got into a serious argument with an extra on set who was allegedly a member of the Rollin' 20 Bloods gang. The situation escalated quickly, with Tupac becoming increasingly agitated and angry as the extra continued to provoke him throughout the day. When things finally boiled over, Tupac was ready to fight, and the tension on set became so intense that other crew members and extras started backing away from the conflict. That's when Maya Angelou calmly walked over to Tupac, took him by the shoulder, and said simply, "Let me speak to you." She managed to diffuse the entire situation by talking to him about his importance and reminding him that hundreds of years of struggle had led to his moment. Tupac broke down crying as she spoke to him, and Angelou used her hands to wipe the tears from his cheeks. The most amusing part of this whole story came later when Janet Jackson ran up to Maya Angelou, excited and amazed that she had just spoken to Tupac Shakur. Angelou's response was perfectly honest and hilariously innocent. "Darling, I don't know Six-Pack." She had misheard his stage name and had no clue that the young man she had just counseled was a famous musician whose world was completely different from her own literary and academic circles. Fact 5. Tupac left set to join LA riots. On April 29, 1992, the filming of Poetic Justice was interrupted by one of the most significant civil rights events in modern American history, and Tupac Shakur made the remarkable decision to leave the movie set to participate in the Los Angeles riots that erupted after the Rodney King verdict was announced. This wasn't just a brief absence from work. Tupac literally walked away from his starring role opposite Janet Jackson to join the protest movement that was sweeping through the city. The timing of this incident was particularly dramatic because the cast and crew were filming at the Simi Drive-In in Simi Valley, which was just 2 miles away from the courthouse where the trial had taken place. When news broke that the 4 police officers who had brutally beaten Rodney King were acquitted of most charges, the shock and anger rippled through the film set immediately. Director John Singleton, who was only 24 years old at the time, later described how he heard the verdict on the radio while driving to work and couldn't believe what was happening. For Tupac, who was just 20 years old and already known for his passionate activism and social consciousness. The verdict represented everything he had been rapping about regarding police brutality and systemic racism. According to Singleton, when the riots began spreading throughout Los Angeles, Tupac felt compelled to leave the set and participate in what he saw as a historic moment of protest against injustice. The young rapper wasn't content to just sit on a movie set making entertainment. While his community was rising up in response to what many viewed as a complete failure of the justice system. The production team had to work around Tupac's absence, but they understood the gravity of the situation and the personal importance this moment held for him. Singleton later confirmed that Tupac did return to the set in time to continue filming, but his temporary departure showed just how deeply committed he was to the causes he believed in. This incident perfectly captured Tupac's character. Even when he had a major career opportunity in front of him, he was willing to put his principles first and participate in what he saw as a crucial moment in the fight for civil rights. Fact 6. Box braids came from Michael Jackson video. Janet Jackson's iconic box braids in Poetic Justice, which became one of the most influential hairstyles of the 1990s, actually came from an unexpected source that had nothing to do with the movie itself. The hairstyle that would later be called Poetic Justice braids by fans around the world was directly inspired by a dancer named Jossie Harris, who had worn similar braids in Michael Jackson's Remember the Time music video. Director John Singleton revealed this surprising origin story during a 2013 interview for the film's 20th anniversary, explaining that the braids were the result of a collaborative effort between himself, Janet, dance choreographer Fatima Robinson, and Harris herself. The connection happened because Singleton had also directed Michael Jackson's Remember the Time video, where he first noticed Harris's striking braided hairstyle and thought it would be perfect for creating the right look for Janet's character in his upcoming film. Singleton's approach to getting Janet into character involved more than just acting coaching. He wanted her to completely transform her appearance and attitude to believably play Justice, a young woman from South Central Los Angeles. To help with this transformation, Singleton brought Harris and Fatima Robinson over to spend time with Janet, allowing them to become friends naturally while also serving as style inspiration for the character. The braiding style that Harris wore actually had its roots in Harlem, representing an authentic African-American hairstyle that had been popular in urban communities for years before it gained mainstream attention. Singleton specifically wanted to take this genuine cultural element from the East Coast and incorporate it into his West Coast story, creating a visual bridge between different African-American communities across the country. When Singleton suggested that Janet try wearing her hair like Harris's braids, the idea immediately clicked with everyone involved in the production. The hairstyle perfectly captured the character of Justice, someone who was both stylish and practical, rooted in her community, but also expressing her individual creativity. What none of them could have predicted was how influential this hairstyle choice would become, with the braids eventually being named after the movie itself and inspiring countless women to adopt the look for decades to come. Fact 7. Maya Angelou calmed gun, confrontation with tears. One of the most intense and dangerous moments during the filming of Poetic Justice escalated to the point where Tupac allegedly pulled out a .40 caliber pistol during a confrontation with an extra, but the situation was completely diffused by Maya Angelou's powerful intervention that brought the young rapper to tears. This incident happened in July of 1992 near Genesee Park and involved an extra who was reportedly a member of the Rollin' 20 Bloods gang. The confrontation had been building throughout the day, as the extra kept provoking Tupac from a distance, making jokes about his name, and constantly heckling him while they were trying to film. Tupac was only 20 years old at the time and was dealing with the pressure of starring in a major Hollywood movie opposite Janet Jackson, so his patience was already running thin. According to witnesses on set, the extra claimed that Tupac flashed Crip Gang signs at him before the situation escalated to the point where Tupac allegedly brandished the weapon. What happened next became one of the most memorable moments of the entire production. Though no other crew members actually witnessed Tupac pulling out a gun, they only heard the loud confrontation that was taking place. While everyone else on set was either running away or trying unsuccessfully to calm Tupac down, Maya Angelou walked directly toward the chaos and simply said, "Honey, come here. Honey, come here." According to director John Singleton, who witnessed the entire scene, Tupac immediately responded to Angelou's calm voice and came to her. She put her arms around him and walked him away from the crowd so they could have a private conversation. During their talk, Angelou reminded Tupac of his importance and told him that hundreds of years of struggle had been for him and people like him. Her words had such a profound impact on the young rapper that he broke down completely and started crying. Angelou later described how she used her hands to dry the tears from Tupac's cheeks while continuing to speak to him gently. Tupac later told his mother Afeni Shakur about this moment, and Afeni was so moved by Angelou's intervention that she wrote a thank you letter to the poet for looking out for her son during such a confusing and difficult time in his life. Fact 8. Phenomenal Woman wasn't written for the movie. Many people who watched Poetic Justice came away believing that Maya Angelou had written her powerful poem, Phenomenal Woman, specifically for the film. But this assumption is completely wrong. The famous poem that Janet Jackson's character recites throughout the movie was actually written and published 15 years before the film was even made, first appearing in Maya Angelou's poetry collection, And Still I Rise, in 1978. The confusion about the poem's origins is understandable because Phenomenal Woman fits so perfectly with the themes and character development in Poetic Justice that it seems like it must have been created specifically for Justice's story. The poem's celebration of inner strength, self-confidence, and feminine power aligns beautifully with Janet Jackson's character, who is learning to love herself again after experiencing tremendous loss and trauma. What makes this misconception even more widespread is that Phenomenal Woman had already been published in Cosmopolitan magazine in 1978, the same year it appeared in Angelou's book, which means the poem was already well known in popular culture long before John Singleton decided to use it in his movie. The poem was actually one of Maya Angelou's most popular and frequently performed pieces, something she often recited at public readings and events throughout the 1980s. When Singleton was developing Poetic Justice, he specifically chose to use Maya Angelou's existing poetry because he wanted his film to feature authentic, powerful writing that would elevate the story beyond a typical Hollywood romance. Rather than commissioning new work, he selected poems from Angelou's established body of work that would serve the emotional journey of his main character. The decision to use Phenomenal Woman was particularly brilliant because the poem had already proven its impact and staying power over more than a decade of public appreciation. By 1993, when the movie was released, the poem was considered one of Angelou's signature pieces, and her appearance in the film, as one of the elderly sisters at the family reunion, added an extra layer of authenticity to the project. The movie actually helped introduce Angelou's poetry to a whole new generation of fans who might not have discovered her work otherwise. Fact 9. Janet was nominated for a Razzie. In one of the most surprising and controversial award nominations of the 1990s, Janet Jackson received a Razzie Award nomination for Worst Actress for her performance in Poetic Justice, despite the fact that most critics and audiences actually praised her acting debut. The Golden Raspberry Awards, commonly known as the Razzies, are given out each year to recognize the worst performances in films in Hollywood, making this nomination particularly shocking for a movie that was generally well received. What made this nomination so bizarre was that Janet Jackson's performance was widely considered one of the strongest elements of the entire film. Critics specifically noted how she managed to strip away her pop star persona and deliver a genuinely authentic portrayal of Justice, a grieving young woman from South Central Los Angeles who was dealing with trauma and learning to trust again. Many reviewers commented on how Jackson brought real depth and vulnerability to the role, showing acting skills that nobody expected from someone who was primarily known as a music superstar. The Razzie nomination seemed to reflect more about Hollywood's bias against musicians trying to act than it did about Jackson's actual performance quality. At the time, There was a general skepticism in the entertainment industry about pop stars crossing over into movies, and the Razzie voters may have been influenced by this prejudice rather than judging her work on its own merits. Even more ironic was the fact that while Janet Jackson was being nominated for Worst Acting, her co-star Tupac Shakur was receiving praise for his natural screen presence and compelling performance as Lucky. The contrast highlighted how unfairly Jackson was being judged, especially since many people who worked on the film have since described her as professional, dedicated, and genuinely talented in her acting scenes. Film critic Bilge Ebbery later wrote about this nomination, calling it particularly unfair and noting that Jackson delivered what he considered a standout performance. The nomination became even more puzzling when viewed in hindsight, as Jackson's work in Poetic Justice is now remembered as a successful transition from music to acting that paved the way for other musicians to be taken seriously as actors in Hollywood films. Fact 10. Theaters refused to show the film. When Poetic Justice was scheduled to open in theaters on July 23, 1993, the major theater chain Cineplex Odeon made the controversial decision to refuse showing the film at their Universal City Walk Hollywood location because they were afraid it might lead to violence. This decision sparked immediate outrage and accusations of racism, as many people pointed out that the theater chain was making assumptions about the movie's predominantly African American audience. The theater's concerns weren't entirely unfounded, given the climate of the early 1990s when several high-profile incidents had occurred at screenings of urban-themed films. However, critics argued that Cineplex Odeon was unfairly profiling Poetic Justice based on stereotypes rather than the actual content of the movie, which was more of a romantic drama than an action film that might incite violence. Rita Walters, a prominent community leader, immediately called out Cineplex Odeon's decision as racist and put public pressure on the company to reverse their policy. The controversy became so heated that the theater chain eventually agreed to show the film, but they delayed the release at that location until July 28, 5 days after the nationwide opening. Unfortunately, the theater executives' fears turned out to have some basis in reality, though whether their refusal to show the film initially had any impact on preventing violence is debatable. During the movie's opening weekend, 5 separate violent incidents occurred at theaters across the country where Poetic Justice was being shown. The most serious of these incidents happened outside a theater in Las Vegas, where someone was actually killed in connection with the movie screening. These violent incidents created a complicated situation for everyone involved with the film, because while the movie itself was a thoughtful exploration of love, loss, and healing in urban communities, it became associated with real-world violence that had nothing to do with its actual message or content. The incidents also reinforced harmful stereotypes about African American moviegoers and made it more difficult for similar films to get wide theatrical releases in the future. Despite these challenges, Poetic Justice still managed to open at number 1 at the box office during its first weekend, earning over $11 million, and proving that there was a strong audience for the film regardless of the controversy surrounding its release. Fact 11. Tupac's song appeared on posthumous album. During the production of Poetic Justice in 1992, Tupac Shakur recorded a song specifically for the film called Definition of a Thug Nigga. But this track took on special significance years later, when it became part of his posthumous musical legacy. The song was created as part of Tupac's contribution to the movie's soundtrack, showcasing his dual talents as both an actor and a musician during what was still the early phase of his recording career. While the Poetic Justice soundtrack featured several popular artists and became a commercial success, reaching number 23 on the Billboard 200 chart and earning gold certification, Tupac's Definition of a Thug Nigga didn't actually appear on the original soundtrack album that was released in 1993. Instead, the track remained unreleased for several years, sitting in the vaults along with other recordings that Tupac had made during his prolific but tragically brief career. The song finally saw the light of day 4 years after Tupac's death in September of 1996, when it was included on his posthumous album, Are You Still Down? Remember Me, in 1997. This double album was one of the first major releases of previously unreleased Tupac material after his passing, and it became a way for fans to hear music that he had recorded during different periods of his career, including his time working on Poetic Justice. The fact that this particular song ended up on a posthumous release makes it especially poignant for fans of both Tupac's music and the movie, because it represents a piece of his artistic output from a time when he was exploring acting and expanding his creative horizons beyond just hip-hop recording. The track serves as a musical time capsule from the Poetic Justice era, capturing Tupac's mindset and lyrical style during the period when he was working closely with John Singleton and developing his screen presence. Are You Still Down? Remember Me went on to achieve significant commercial success, reaching number 2 on the Billboard 200 and eventually being certified quadruple platinum, which means that millions of people who discovered the album were also getting a piece of music that was directly connected to Tupac's film work and his collaboration with the Poetic Justice production. Fact 12. John Singleton had no film experience. When John Singleton directed Poetic Justice in 1992, he was essentially a complete beginner who was still figuring out how to make movies, having only directed one film before in his entire career. This shocking lack of experience becomes even more remarkable when you consider that his previous film, Boys and the Hood, had been a massive critical and commercial success that earned him an Academy Award nomination for Best Director, making him the youngest person and first African American ever nominated in that category. Singleton was brutally honest about his inexperience during a 2016 interview at the Academy of Motion Pictures Arts and Sciences, where he openly admitted that he was just a smart-ass film student who thought he knew everything about movies when he made his debut film. He explained that all of his confidence came from theoretical knowledge rather than actual hands-on experience, and that he had no real idea what he was doing when cameras started rolling on his first major Hollywood production. The most surprising part of Singleton's confession was his admission that he learned how to direct while actually making Boys and the Hood, essentially treating his debut feature film as an on-the-job training experience. He described how he felt completely confident and cocky during the development and pre-production phases. But once the movie got green-lit and he was faced with the reality of directing a major studio film, fear set in, and he realized how much he didn't know about the practical aspects of filmmaking. According to Singleton, as the movie was going along, I was learning how to direct, which means that by the time he started working on Poetic Justice, he only had the experience from that single previous film to draw upon. This context makes his direction of Poetic Justice even more impressive, considering that he was managing complex performances from major stars like Janet Jackson and Tupac Shakur, while still being essentially a novice filmmaker. Singleton's honesty about his lack of experience highlights just how remarkable his early success was, and it also explains why Poetic Justice felt like such a different kind of film from his debut. He was still experimenting and learning his craft while working with some of the biggest names in entertainment. Fact 13. LA riot damage, visible in background. One of the most haunting and historically significant details in Poetic Justice can be spotted during an early scene when Janet Jackson's character Justice is driving her car through Crenshaw Boulevard, where viewers can actually see real damage from the 1992 Los Angeles riots, still visible in the background of various shopping centers and buildings. This wasn't a deliberate artistic choice by director John Singleton. It was simply the reality of filming in South Central Los Angeles during the immediate aftermath of one of the most destructive civil unrest events in American history. The timing of the Poetic Justice production placed it right in the middle of this historic moment, as filming began on April 14, 1992, and the riots erupted just 2 weeks later on April 29, when the Rodney King verdict was announced. The riots lasted for 6 days and caused massive destruction throughout Los Angeles, with particularly heavy damage occurring in South Central, which was exactly where Singleton wanted to film his movie about life in that community. Rather than moving the production to a different location or waiting for the damaged areas to be rebuilt, Singleton made the decision to continue filming in the same neighborhoods where the story was supposed to take place. This meant that when cameras rolled on scenes showing Justice navigating her daily life in South Central, they were capturing the authentic environment that residents were actually living in during that period, complete with boarded-up windows, burned buildings, and other visible signs of the recent unrest. The presence of this riot damage in the background of the film creates an unintentional documentary element that makes Poetic Justice a unique historical artifact. Viewers who know what to look for can see the real impact that the riots had on the community, providing a sobering reminder of the social and economic tensions that were affecting the same neighborhoods where the characters were supposed to be living their lives. This detail also adds another layer of authenticity to the film's portrayal of urban life, since the characters in the movie would have been dealing with the same aftermath and community trauma that real residents were experiencing during that time period. Fact 14. Usher had early career appearance. Years before Usher Raymond became one of the biggest R&B superstars in the world, he made one of his very first professional recording appearances on the Poetic Justice soundtrack, with a song called Call Me a Mac in 1993. At the time of this recording, Usher was just a teenage unknown artist who was still trying to break into the music industry, making his inclusion on this major Hollywood soundtrack an incredibly important early career milestone. The Poetic Justice soundtrack was a significant commercial release that featured established artists like TLC and various hip-hop acts, so getting a spot on this album was a big deal for any young performer trying to make a name for themselves. The soundtrack ended up reaching number 23 on the Billboard 200 chart and was certified gold by the Recording Industry Association of America, which means that Usher's early work was part of a genuinely successful project that sold hundreds of thousands of copies. What makes this appearance even more remarkable is that Call Me a Mac was released during the very beginning stages of Usher's career, when he was still a teenager working with his first record label. Most people who bought the Poetic Justice soundtrack in 1993 probably had no idea who Usher Raymond was, and they certainly couldn't have predicted that this young artist would go on to become one of the most successful R&B performers of the next 2 decades. The song itself was recorded at Unique Recording Studios in New York City, along with the other soundtrack material, giving Usher the chance to work in a professional recording environment alongside more established artists. This experience likely provided valuable learning opportunities for the young singer as he was developing his sound and stage presence. Looking back, Call Me a Mac represents a fascinating piece of music history because it captures Usher at the very start of what would become an incredibly successful career that included multiple Grammy Awards, Diamond-certified albums, and worldwide fame. For fans of both Usher and Poetic Justice, the soundtrack serves as a time capsule that shows how even major superstars had to start somewhere, often with small appearances on projects that seemed much bigger than they were at the time. Fact 15. Q-Tip originally offered Tupac's role. Before Tupac Shakur ever stepped foot on the set of Poetic Justice, director John Singleton had actually offered the lead male role of Lucky to Q-Tip from A Tribe Called Quest, but the rapper made the surprising decision to turn down the starring part in favor of playing a much smaller role that would end up being one of the most memorable scenes in the entire movie. This casting choice completely changed the trajectory of the film and led to one of the most interesting what-if scenarios in 1990s cinema. Q-Tip later revealed that Singleton had initially approached him about playing Lucky, the postal worker who becomes Janet Jackson's love interest, and travels with her from Los Angeles to Oakland during the main story of the film. This would have been a significant acting opportunity for Q-Tip, as the Lucky character appears throughout most of the movie and has extensive dialogue and character development scenes with Jackson. Instead of taking the larger role, Q-Tip chose to play Markel, Janet's boyfriend, who gets killed in the opening scene at the drive-in movie theater. While this role only lasts for a few minutes of screen time, it turned out to be incredibly impactful because it sets up the entire emotional foundation for Justice's character and her journey throughout the rest of the film. The scene where Markel dies is one of the most powerful and memorable moments in Poetic Justice, establishing the trauma and loss that drives everything that happens afterward. Q-Tip's decision to take the smaller part worked out perfectly for everyone involved, because it meant that Tupac Shakur was available to play Lucky when Singleton needed to recast the role. Tupac brought a completely different energy and screen presence to the character than Q-Tip would have, and his chemistry with Janet Jackson became one of the defining elements of the entire movie. The choice also allowed Q-Tip to have a meaningful contribution to the film without committing to the demanding schedule that would have come with playing the male lead. Since Q-Tip and Janet Jackson had a real romantic relationship that developed during and after filming, his appearance as her character's first love adds an extra layer of authenticity to their on-screen connection.